Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that's been making headlines, and honestly, it's a bit unnerving.
It is.
Listeria,
Yeah.
with those recent recalls and that uh, tragic case linked to contaminated meat.
Yeah, it's definitely something we all need to be aware of, especially with the holidays coming up, lots of food prep happening.
Exactly. We've been getting a ton of questions from you all wanting to know more about listeria and how to stay safe, so
Absolutely.
that's what we're going to tackle today. I think maybe the best place to start is just like, what is listeria?
Yeah.
For anyone who might not be familiar.
Yeah, sure. So Listeria, it's basically a type of bacteria, and it's found kind of everywhere, like in the environment, soil, water,
Oh, okay.
and it can make its way into our food, unfortunately. And what makes it a little tricky is that it can even grow in cold temperatures.
Oh, so even if we're like diligently refrigerating things, that's not necessarily a guarantee.
Right, exactly. That's why it's important to really understand how it gets into food,
Yeah.
especially ready-to-eat meats,
Okay, so that makes sense.
because those are often consumed without any further cooking. So
Right,
it
yeah.
gives the listeria kind of a direct route.
Straight into our systems. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I mean, we encounter bacteria all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, what makes listeria particularly dangerous compared to, I don't know,
Yeah.
other things that might be lurking out there?
Right. So for most healthy adults, if they do ingest listeria, they might just experience mild symptoms or even no symptoms at all.
Oh, okay.
But it's the potential for listeriosis that makes it so serious, which
Oh,
is the infection
gotcha.
caused by this bacteria.
So that's what really sets it apart.
Right. And that can be, very serious, even life-threatening, especially for, pregnant women, newborns, older adults, people with weakened immune systems.
So it's kind of a wide range, a big spectrum there of folks who are particularly vulnerable.
Exactly, yeah.
So for those folks, or frankly for anyone, I mean, what should we be on the lookout for if we think, oh, shoot, maybe I ate something and I'm not feeling so hot? Like, what are the symptoms of listeriosis?
Yeah, so that's the tricky part.
Right?
A lot of the symptoms can mimic the flu, so you might just have a fever, muscle aches, headache,
Oh, okay.
but then you can get more severe symptoms like stiff neck, confusion, loss of balance, even convulsions.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to take seriously. And sometimes you might even have like diarrhea or other gastrointestinal issues before those more severe symptoms show up.
So it sounds like it's always better to, like, err on the side of caution. Like, if you've recently eaten some ready-to-eat meats, especially if you're in one of those high-risk categories and you're feeling any of those symptoms,
Yeah,
go see your doctor.
absolutely. Yeah. And early diagnosis and treatment are really crucial when it comes to listeriosis.
Okay.
So antibiotics are typically used.
Good to know. Good to
Yeah.
know. Okay, so now let's get into like the specifics of this outbreak. We've been saying ready to eat meat and poultry products, but let's name names. Like, what companies are involved here and what specifically has been recalled?
Right. So the two main companies involved are Yu Shang Food, Inc., and BrucePac.
Okay.
And they've issued voluntary recalls for a really wide range of products. So we're talking cooked chicken, pork hock, pork belly, beef shank.
Wow, this is a lot of different products.
It is. Even chicken feet, pork tongues,
Okay.
a lot of different ready-to-eat meat products.
So it's not just like one specific thing. This is a pretty broad
Right.
spectrum of stuff.
Yeah.
And these products weren't just sold like in one specific region, were they? Like, this is kind of,
Right. Unfortunately not. They were distributed nationwide.
oh, wow.
Yeah. Sold in retail stores, online, even ended up in some schools and
Oh
institutions.
gosh. Yeah, this is pretty widespread. So that's why it's really important, I guess, to check, like, even if you don't think you bought a specific brand, just check your fridge, check your freezer, make sure you don't have any of these things lurking.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's say you do find one of these recalled products in your fridge. Like, what's the like absolute first thing you should do?
The first thing is I repeat, do not try to cook it or salvage it in any way.
Okay.
Listeria is pretty resilient and your health is worth way more than, a few bucks. So the best thing to do is just discard the product immediately.
Okay, so straight to the trash it is.
Yeah.
Are there any like specific instructions on how to do that safely?
Yeah, it's always a good idea to double bag it before you throw it away, just to kind of minimize any risk of cross-contamination. And if you still have the packaging, check for any specific disposal instruction.
No.
Some retailers might even, offer returns for recalled items.
Okay.
And then, of course, after you've disposed of the product, you definitely want to thoroughly clean your refrigerator and freezer where the product was stored just to make sure there's no lingering contamination.
Okay, so dispose of it safely
Okay.
and then scrub those shelves down. Gotcha. What's next? So I'm imagining this is where understanding what listeria actually looks like might come in handy.
Yeah.
I mean, can you even see it on food?
So that's the tricky part. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it.
Oh, so it's invisible.
It's invisible.
Oh, that's unsettling.
Yeah, that's what makes it so dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It can be present even if the food looks and smells perfectly fine.
That's seriously unsettling.
Uh,
So how on earth are we supposed to know if something's contaminated?
Right, so that's where those recall notices become really critical. The USDA and the CDC, they work tirelessly to track outbreaks and identify contaminated products.
Okay.
So their websites are a great resource to kind of stay updated on the latest information on recalls and safety alerts.
Okay, so bookmarks ready. We'll also be sure to include those links in the show notes for this episode.
Great.
But I guess the bottom line is, if you think you've eaten something contaminated, those symptoms we talked about earlier,
Right.
those are your warning signs. Go see a doctor,
Yeah.
especially if you're in one of those high-risk groups that we were discussing earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. Prevention is key, but also, early detection and treatment if you do happen to get sick.
Absolutely. So much good information here. I know this is a lot to process, but I think we've covered some really crucial stuff. Before we move on, is there anything else, like any final thoughts or key takeaways about identifying contaminated products or recognizing listeriosis? Anything we haven't touched on yet that you think our listeners should know?
I think the biggest takeaway is you can't rely on your senses to detect listeria.
Right.
So it's really about staying informed about those recalls and paying close attention to your health.
Yeah, good advice.
If you suspect that you might have consumed something contaminated,
Awesome. Okay, well now, let's move on to what those companies are actually doing to address this issue and, how we as consumers can be even more proactive
okay.
about preventing listeria contamination. So stay tuned for part 2.
Welcome back to our Listeria deep dive.
We're back. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely been, I don't know, eye-opening for me. Little unsettling, I gotta admit.
Understandably. It can be a bit concerning.
But, knowledge is power.
Exactly.
That's what we always say. So, last part, we talked about the companies involved.
Right.
Yu Shang Food, Inc., and BrucePac.
Uh-huh.
What are they, actually doing to address this whole situation?
So both companies, they've taken that crucial step of issuing voluntary recalls for the products that are potentially contaminated.
Okay.
So they're really working to get those products off store shelves and out of the distribution chain as quickly as possible.
That's good. That's a good first step. But what about preventing something like this from happening again? Are they doing anything to figure out the root cause?
Absolutely. So they're actually cooperating with investigations by both the USDA and the CDC
Okay.
to really figure out what happened, how this contamination occurred.
Gotcha.
And they're also reviewing their own food safety practices, implementing corrective actions based on what they find.
So it's kind of a top to bottom, review of what they're doing to make sure everything's up to those, highest safety standards.
Exactly, yeah. The goal is to pinpoint any weaknesses in their systems and really strengthen them to prevent these outbreaks from happening in the future and regain that consumer trust, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in, I imagine, as a company.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, public health has got to be the priority.
Absolutely. They have a responsibility to ensure that their products are safe for consumption, and this outbreak is a stark reminder of that.
It is. Okay, well, speaking of responsibility, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about what we can do as consumers to be more proactive about preventing listeria contamination, right? We've talked about, throwing out recalled products, good hygiene in the kitchen. But are there any other practical steps we can take, particularly when we're at the grocery store, buying these ready-to-eat meats?
Yeah. Definitely. Being a savvy shopper can make a real difference.
Okay, good.
First and foremost, always check those use by or sell by dates on any perishable product,
Okay.
including ready-to-eat meats. It's such a simple step, but it's easy to overlook.
Yeah, I feel like we all go into autopilot mode sometimes, just grabbing things.
Totally. But those dates are there for a reason.
They are.
They're key indicators of the product's freshness and help you avoid buying something that's been sitting on the shelf for too long.
Right. Okay. Dates checked. What else should we be looking for when we're like picking out those ready-to-eat meats?
Pay close attention to the packaging. Look for any signs of damage, like tears, punctures, leaks. Damaged packaging, it can be an open invitation for bacteria.
Right. So no dented cans or leaky packages. Got it.
Exactly. And if you're at the deli counter, don't be shy about asking questions, Inquire about the freshness, how long it's been on display, anything that makes you kind of question it.
Yeah. Knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
We have the right as consumers to know that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so once we've bought our ready-to-eat meats, we've checked the packaging, what's the best way to handle them once we get home?
Get them home and into the refrigerator as quickly as possible.
That's fair.
Don't leave those bags sitting in a hot car for hours after grocery shopping. Maintaining that cold chain helps slow down bacterial growth.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Especially, if you're running errands after you go to the grocery store.
Right.
It's tempting to just leave stuff in the car, but it's not worth the risk.
Okay.
So we've covered throwing out recalled products, practicing good kitchen hygiene, being mindful at the grocery store, getting those things into the fridge ASAP.
Right.
Anything else?
Yeah. I think this might seem obvious, but it's worth repeating. If you know anyone who might have purchased any of these recalled products, let them know.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Sharing information can really make a difference, maybe even prevent someone from getting sick.
Absolutely. Spread the word.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, just about being aware in our own kitchens.
Right.
But I think it's important to kind of acknowledge this isn't an isolated incident. Listeria outbreaks, unfortunately, happen more often than we'd like to think.
Right.
So in our final part, I think let's zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about what this outbreak reveals about our food system as a whole.
Absolutely.
And, what the long-term implications might be. So stay tuned for part 3. And we are back for the final part of our Listeria deep dive. I feel like we've really gone deep here.
Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground.
We've covered, what it is, the symptoms,
Uh-huh.
all those practical tips to stay safe, the specifics of this outbreak. But now I kind of want to, zoom out a little bit, talk about the bigger picture,
Yeah, absolutely. I think this outbreak, while, very unfortunate, it does offer this opportunity to kind of reflect on the vulnerabilities within our food system as a whole.
Right.
And think about, okay, how can we learn from this? And how can we move forward in a way that really prioritizes food safety?
Yeah, because it's not just about these two companies, right? Like this feels like a wake-up call for everyone involved in getting food from farm to table.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting is that these types of outbreaks often highlight that gap between what we think we're doing to ensure food safety and the reality of current practices.
Right.
And it forces us to kind of re-examine regulations, industry standards, and even our own habits.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. First up, regulations. What kind of changes might we see on the horizon in response to something like this?
So it's still early, but I think, historically, outbreaks like this often spark calls for stricter regulations, increased oversight of food production facilities.
Makes sense.
So think more frequent inspections, tougher penalties for violations, really raising the bar for food safety across the board.
Right. If the stakes are higher, then companies are going to be way more cautious.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There could also be a push for greater transparency in the supply chain.
Okay.
If we can easily trace products back to their source, then it allows for, quicker, more targeted recalls.
Right. So if there's an issue, you can pinpoint exactly where it came from, contain it faster.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So that's regulations. What about the food industry itself? What role do they play in all this, in preventing future outbreaks?
So they're absolutely on the front lines, right? And I think this outbreak could lead to a renewed focus within the industry on really investing in food safety technologies.
Okay.
Implementing more rigorous testing procedures, providing comprehensive training programs for employees.
So it's not just about meeting those bare minimum requirements, but going above and beyond to ensure the safety of their products.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about fostering this culture of food safety from the top down. And, quite frankly, it's good business sense too.
Yeah.
building that trust.
It is because, I mean, who wants to buy from a company that has like a questionable safety record?
Right, exactly. And I think, consumers are becoming increasingly aware of these issues and they're demanding that transparency and accountability.
They are.
Yeah.
So, which brings us to us, the consumers. We've talked about all those, those practical tips.
Right.
But is there anything else we can do beyond being, vigilant about recalls and careful in our own kitchens?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things we can do is be vocal. If you see something at a grocery store or a restaurant even,
Okay.
that concerns you, don't be afraid to speak up.
Oh, interesting.
Ask questions. Ask about the food handling practices. Point out any potential safety issues.
So it's not about being a nuisance. It's about being like an advocate for safer food.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of your wallet. Every time you choose to support companies that are prioritizing food safety, you're sending a message.
It's like voting with our dollars.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can actually influence change through those purchasing decisions.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, well, this outbreak, as tragic as it is, it has really brought food safety to the forefront of our minds. So let's use this moment to learn, adapt, and really demand better.
Absolutely.
From the entire food system. To our listeners, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, stay safe. And that wraps up our Listeria Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.